talking about yet another list I made of books. This is books that I'm excited to read in 2025. So I would say it's like a general 2025 TBR. So it's divided into 12 new releases and then 12 not new releases that I want to try to make a goal to read this year. I'm so excited. I feel like I never, like last year especially, I did not pay attention to new releases. Of course, I always pay attention to Emily Henry having a new release, but it's always in April or somewhere around there. So I always know to expect a new book of hers, but like the two books that Ali Hazelwood came out with, had no idea they were happening. It was a fun surprise. I mean, I didn't mind it. It was like I would log on to book social media and it would be like, so-and-so is releasing something next week. And I'd be like, ah, that's so cool, I didn't know. So this year I'm a little bit more prepared. I have a list of new releases that I definitely want to get to. Oh, actually, I think it's only 11 new releases, but that's okay. The first one is Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. I'm so excited. I love Ali Hazelwood's books. I read 3 books by her last year. I listened to her one audiobook she did with Spotify. So I will literally consume any form of writing that she releases. I'm so excited about it. It's a college romance. So we have a diver as the main female character, and I think it's water polo or a swimmer is the main male character. They both do water sports, which is so interesting. I have never read a water sport romance. I'm very partial to hockey romances. I'm so excited. I love Ali Hazelwood doing new things. Don't get me wrong, I love the STEM romances. I'm not hating on those whatsoever, but I'm really excited for her branching out and trying new things. I'm sure I'm gonna love it. Okay, the next one is Wild Side by Elsie Silver. I am obsessed with the Rose Hill series. I really loved Wild Love. I wasn't the biggest fan of Wild Eyes, but in Wild Eyes we see the couple for Wild Side and I'm ecstatic. I can't wait. It's like I think it's a marriage of convenience or just arranged. The two characters in that book are gonna get married and I don't know why. I'm not sure if I'm the only one that doesn't know why. I don't wonder if it's out there somewhere on the internet why they're getting married, but I'm so excited. It's the glimpses we've gotten of the main male character in that book is like he's so grumpy, he like is very moody, like very keeps to himself. So I'm gonna love him immediately. I'm so excited for that book. The next book I'm a little nervous about. It's Fearless by Lauren Roberts. So I loved Powerless. I read it last year and I gave it 5 stars. Then I read Reckless and I gave it 2 stars. I have very harsh opinions about that book. It really was not my favorite. So I am like nervous that Fearless could go either way. It could also be really bad, as I think Reckless is, or it could be amazing, like I think Powerless is. I don't know. And I'm really nervous about it. Honestly, I feel like that's the only book that I'm like, I don't know about that. As I mentioned, we have another Emily Henry book coming out. It's called Great Big Beautiful Life. And if I'm not mistaken, I think I've heard everyone saying it's kind of written based off of The Last Great American Dynasty, the Taylor Swift song. Is that right? Or I think it's that one. I don't know which other one it could be. If I'm wrong, please let me know. I love all of Emily Henry's books. I genuinely would be shocked if she ever wrote something I didn't like. So of course I'm excited for this one. Of course I'm gonna go get it. That's all there is to say. Okay, I'm sorry that I literally am like, oh my god, I'm so excited. I'm excited about all of them. But the next one I didn't expect. If you saw my top 24 books of 2024, you would know that her last series, The Shepherd King duology, One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns, was in my top 3. I love that series so much and I'm so excited to read something else by her. It's gonna be called The Night and the Moth. I'm so excited. I absolutely adore her writing. I love the setting. Maybe this is gonna be another gothic one. I'm not sure. I should probably do some more research about these. At least I know they're coming out. I don't even have the dates down, but I'll keep my eye out for them. But I'm really so excited about that one because I'm obsessed with her last series. And so I hope that this new book lives up to my expectations. And then we have another book by Ashley Poston. I genuinely never know how to pronounce her last name, but it's called Sounds Like Love. And I really am rooting for this book. So she came out with a novel love story last year and I DNF'd that book actually. It was really not for me. I really hated the characters in that book. So I couldn't read it. And I love the Dead Romantics. I love The 7 Year Slip. So I'm really rooting for another book by her. I hope it compares to the books that I love by her and not the one that I don't. Next, we have Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. so excited about this one. So, fun fact, I went to the book tour she did for the Fragile Threads of Power, which is part of the Shades of Magic series, and she mentioned this book that she's releasing this year. She mentioned writing it, and also, if you don't know, she wrote The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and she talks openly about how much she poured into that book, especially of herself. And then she says that Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil is she also poured a lot of herself into, but it's like in a dark, I don't know if it's gothic, but it's like a darker Addie LaRue book, which I'm so excited about. I love it. I actually love every single book she's ever written, so I have high hopes. I actually don't think I could ever read something of hers I don't like. So I'm really excited for this one. It has lesbian toxic vampires. That's like what she's branding it as, and that sounds like a great time to me. I'm so excited. And then the next one is Rose in Chains by Julie Soto. She wrote Not Another Love Song, and I think it's called Forget Me Not. I didn't read Forget Me Not, but I really enjoyed Not Another Love Song, surprisingly. And I think that this book that she's coming out with is more fantasy, if I'm not mistaken. And I would love to see her fantasy writing. I thought her tension and her banter and her yearning was great in Not Another Love Song, so I would love to see that in a fantasy setting. I think it's gonna be fantastic. Next one, Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. Obviously, I'm gonna read every single Hunger Games book that comes out, and I'm really interested to see this one. So I was not the biggest fan of The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I just recently watched the movie actually, but I finished the book a while ago, and I was not super impressed. Did I read that this year? I completely forgot. I read that this year. I'm sorry, we're gonna have to look at my Goodreads because I actually don't remember when I read that. It could have been maybe at the very end of 2023, but oh, just kidding. I read that in 2023. I don't know why I just was about to have a conniption about that, but anyways. As I was saying, I wasn't the biggest fan of that book. I feel like I desired a lot more from President Snow's story. I kind of feel like the conclusion was yeah, this stuff happened to him and it wasn't great, and he's just kind of a bad person, so that's why he acts like that, and that's why he does the things that he does. And I really wanted a villain arc from him. At least I feel like we didn't get that, and I really am so curious about Haymitch's story. I need to reread The Hunger Games, or actually even finish it. So I've only read up to Catching Fire, and I don't even know if I finished it. It was in middle school. I was more of a Divergent girly. I don't know why. I love the Divergent books, but those movies, oh, not to get off topic. However, I am really excited to see how Haymitch's story goes, and also how they make a movie about him. I feel like Hunger Games movies are always gonna eat. I do think that The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was good. I also go through this internal debate about if I'm ever gonna like any of the new Hunger Games books more than I like the old ones, even though I haven't finished the old ones. I guess I'm more talking about movies in that sense, because I really do like the Hunger Games movies. Anyways, I'm really excited for Suzanne Collins' new book. The next one, I don't know if I actually really want to read it. I feel like I have to. I read The Crimson Moth. I read Heartless Hunter by Kristen Cicerelli, and I didn't think that book was that great. I know it gets a lot of hype. People are talking about how great it is. I don't think it's that great, but I am curious about how it ends, so I will be reading this, especially since I'm pretty sure it's gonna come out on Kindle Unlimited, so it's already gonna be there and I'm going to read it. And I kind of hope that it's better than the first one. I hope I enjoy the second one more. I'm also just really interested to see, like I said, I'm just really interested to see how the story goes. I do think it kind of ended on a cliffhanger, so I want to know what happens. In 2024, I read a book called Lady Macbeth by Ava Reid. I feel like I never shut up about it. And I'm slowly working my way through Ava Reid's books, and she has a new release coming out in 2024 called Fable for the End of the World. And I just threw it on this list. I was like, you know what? I'm making my way through her entire log of books, so I might as well read her new release as well. I don't know anything about that book. I don't know what it's about at all. So that's the funny thing about me doing this video, is I love going into books blind, so I never read the premise of them. So I'm over here being like, yeah, I'm really excited about this book. I don't know what it's about. So here's where we get into the section of my list about books that I want to read that are either already on my physical, well, I guess I want to read everything on my physical TBR, but more priority physical TBR books, or just books that have been brought to my attention that aren't new releases that I want to read. And the first one is When the Moon Hatched. I feel like when it first came out, there was so much hype around that book, and everybody was like, this book is so good, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. There's dragons and really mystical creatures in a really good world. I think it's a huge thick book, and there's a massive glossary at the beginning, so that immediately made me scared to read that book. And then I started to hear more mixed opinions about this book, about people being like, yeah, it's not that great, it's good, but it's maybe not that great. Or some people, of course, there are gonna be some people who don't like the book. So I'm kind of like, I want to read it, but I'm also kind of nervous. So I want to get to that, but I don't know when it would be. I definitely am gonna have to get an audiobook for that too, because that book is thick. Moving on to yet another massive book. I have had Priory of the Orange Tree downloaded on my Kindle for probably 3 years. And I've never gotten to it because it's so long and I'm kind of terrified. I've also heard wonderful things about that book though, and I really want to get into it. That one also has dragons, so I think it's funny that two of my want to reads are like massive books that have dragons. And yeah, I've heard great things about Priory of the Orange Tree, and then I know that there's another one after it now. But I've also, the problem with that book is I've said that I'm gonna read it for 3 years. Like I've been like, oh, I'll put that on my list, and then it never gets read. So I'm gonna try to make it an actual goal this year to read that book. Okay, and then the next one is Dune, which is crazy because I never in my life would have thought that I wanted to read that book, but I really, really enjoyed the Red Rising trilogy that I read last year. Some of the best books I've ever read in my life. And Dune is sci-fi, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember if it's also fantasy. Yeah, so it's science fiction and fantasy, which I think is a good jumping off point because let's look if the Red Rising trilogy is also fantasy or if it's just sci-fi, because I feel like there was a little bit of fantasy. Yeah, so the Red Rising trilogy is also sci-fi fantasy, so I feel like sci-fi fantasy is a good place to start before jumping straight into strictly sci-fi. But I want to read Dune. I still haven't seen either of the movies either, so I think that would be fun to read a book, watch a movie, read a book, watch a movie, even though there's only 2 movies out right now. My goal, I'm only gonna put the first book on my list right now. I don't want to like overwhelm myself and put both Dune 1 and 2 because I'm honestly really scared to get to it. In my head, I feel like it's gonna be similar to reading, or like I think in Dune there's like similar themes to Star Wars, and I think Star Wars is good, so maybe it'll be like reading that. I don't know. Please do not like hate me if that's the most wrong thing to ever compare it to or like say, but like I said, I love going into books blind. Don't really know that much about Dune. I just know it's famous. I know it's like really famous. So that is also playing into why I want to read it. Which leads us to the next book that is also really famous, which makes me want to read it, Game of Thrones. I watched Game of Thrones not too long ago, like a couple years ago, and I really enjoyed most of it. There were definitely aspects of the show that I thought were maybe too violent or too like triggering. It didn't probably need to be like that, but I really like the storyline of it. So I don't know if the books are less violent or more violent. That will be really interesting for me to find out. I am very curious to read the books. I want to say I'm definitely gonna start the first one. I don't want to like completely commit to saying that I'm gonna read the whole series, but I do think it would be interesting to read the whole series and compare it to the show, because I know the end of the show is not, well, I know he's not done writing the series, and also the end of the show was made up by the people making the show and not the author. So I do think that'll be really interesting. And I'm also really intimidated by that one. I think that one, it's obviously fantasy, but I think there's a lot of politics in that. So it's less fun, very cute fantasy and more like serious and depressing. Which, I mean, the show is serious and depressing, so like I'm not gonna be shocked by that. The next one, I'm really just throwing out these like hard-hitting really famous fantasies, but I also want to read either The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings. I don't know what you're supposed to start with. I know that this author is also really famous, so I also really want to read this. I feel like those are like the last 3 books I just mentioned are like the pillars of fantasy. I feel like I heard that somewhere, maybe I read that somewhere, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm just interested to see what it's like to read it versus watching it. The next one is I want to read Little Women. I haven't really read, I don't think I've read a classic written by a female author on my own time. I probably did in high school or something. I don't remember all the books I read then, but I really like the movie, the one with Florence Pugh and Timothy Chalamet. I don't remember what year it came out, but I really like that movie, and so I just want to read I want to read the book because of the movie, which is, I feel like, a terrible thing to say, but I don't know, it makes me interested in reading a classic, so I don't think it's that big of a deal. So the next one I want to read is The Little Friend by Donna Tartt. So I read The Secret History and The Goldfinch a couple years ago, and I really enjoyed both of those, and so I'm curious about her other books. I think that's the only other one that she has. I love that I keep saying these things and I actually don't know the answer to them, so I have to Google them so I don't feel like I'm just lying to you. Yeah, I think she's only written 3 books, and that's the only one that I haven't read by her, so I wanted to check that off my list. I really think her writing is so interesting, and I feel like I've really strayed away from reading literary fiction, and I want to get back to it, and I feel like that's a perfect place to start. The next one is more of just, I want to read a specific author I'm not sure which specific book. I want to read Annabelle Monaghan's books, either Nora Goes Off Script or Summer Romance. I know that a lot of people really loved her most recent release, Summer Romance, and I've heard a lot of comparisons of her and like Emily Henry, where she writes pretty like literary stories, but there's a lot of romance in them, and I obviously love Emily Henry, so I want to check her out and see what I think of her books. Same with the next one, where I want to just read Kristen Hanna books, and I have on my physical TBR, I have Firefly Lane and The Nightingale, so I want to read both of them since I have them physically. I've heard a lot about her recently this year, and she writes historical fiction, which I don't read a lot of, so I think that would be really good to get into. And I'm a little nervous about that because I know that she's like pretty famous for writing really heart-wrenching like books that you sob about. So I'm gonna have to mentally prepare myself for that, but I still want to read her books anyways. Okay, the next one is, I forget what it's called, House of Earth and Blood, which is the first Crescent City book. So last year I read all of Throne of Glass, and I liked it a lot better than I like ACOTAR. So I'm curious about Crescent City. I hear like a lot of mixed reviews, especially about the most recent, the third book in the Crescent City that came out last year. I've heard a lot of people that don't love it. I don't know if it's because it's an urban fantasy or they just are so attached to ACOTAR and Throne of Glass and it's pretty different from those. I'm not really sure. So I'm really curious to read it as someone who does not like ACOTAR and likes Throne of Glass like pretty okay. Like I'm not super obsessed with Throne of Glass. I didn't even think that the series was really super great until I got to the last 3 books of the series, and there's 8 books, I think. Yeah, there's 8 books. So, you know, it took more than halfway into the series for me to start really loving it. So I'm not sure. I still am like really up in the air about how I feel about Sarah J Maas's writing or her characters. That was my biggest problem with the ACOTAR series, is I really actually hated every single one of those characters, except for Asriel. He was my favorite and he like barely talks. So I really am super curious to see how I feel about this third series that I hear so many mixed opinions about. The next one is Lovely War by Julie Berry. I've heard a lot of good things about this book as well, but it's set in World War I, but there's also gods involved. I'm reading the description right now and I'm realizing I had absolutely no idea what it was about. I just know that it takes place during, I don't know if it's both of the world wars or just the second one, but you get a perspective of the gods, and it's like Greek gods involved in World War II. I don't even know, but it sounds really intriguing. I'd love to check it out because I don't know what the heck it's about. The last book I want to get to is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I know this is another, I think this one's sci-fi. Oh, it's not. Okay, this one's just fiction, which is weird. I swear at some point I heard someone say it was science fiction, but it's about 2 people that make a video game together, and I know that it's less about the actual process of them making a video game and more about like their life before, while making the game, and after making the game, which I guess makes sense if it's a fiction book. It focuses more on the characters rather than an actual plot. But I feel like that book was really popular like 2 years ago, and I still haven't read it, and I really want to, and it's on my physical TBR. But I'm sitting here really looking at my physical TBR and it's so random. A lot of times I'm like, who was I when I bought these books? That's a problem for me to deal with. Those were the 25 books that I want to read in 2025. Let me know if there's any from this list that you want to read, or maybe if there's anything I missed from this list that you think I would be interested in. That would be cool. Yeah, just let me know in the comments what you think. And then thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you next week.